left the wood. I was leading and they were following single file. And just as we were stretched across the top of this field, the machine guns opened up. And I was shot through the ammunition pouches in which I was carrying a grenade. They were shattered, spun to the ground. I picked myself up and ran, only 4 or 5 yards to this small building, turned around, and I could see all the chaps spread eagle on the ground. They were killed.
After hiding in a cave, he was rescued by French villagers before eventually helping the French resistance.
I joined up with this young group of resistance fighters. We had a bit of a contretemps with a milice. Now they to us were far more dangerous than the Gestapo, because whereas you might fool the Gestapo with your schoolboy French, you couldn't fool the milice because they were French. They were the sort of paramilitary.
More than 80 days later, he met the advancing Americans and his ordeal was over. 6 decades later, he's very clear about who were the real heroes, the French people and those who didn't return.
It must be remembered that these people, well, had they been discovered with me in their farmhouse, they'd have had no chance. They'd have been put down, as well as myself, immediately. The real heroes will not return. They never left. They lie there where they fell, marked by a small headstone. They are the real heroes.
We're here today to discover the story of Ron Bartley, glider pilot, and we're standing here at RAF Harwell on what was the east-west runway, where on the night of the 5th of June 44 at approximately 11:17 at night, my father took off in glider chalk number 69 in part of Operation Tonga, one of the first Allied troops to arrive in Normandy on that particular night. The story will continue in France after that. He didn't quite make the landing zone. Actually, none of the gliders from this particular station got to where they were supposed to, which was landing zone V. But the closest, I think, was about a quarter of a mile away from where they were supposed to have been. Father crash landed in an orchard just south of Villiers-sur-Mer, where hopefully we will be later on this week, standing on the very spot where it came down.
How does it feel to be when you come here year after year, how does it feel to be coming to a place where your dad took off for this horror, really? How does it feel? What springs to your mind?
Gosh, what it must have been like on the evening of 1944. This mission was quite secret. He obviously knew where they were off to, but the two guys, the jeep drivers that they had, who were nicknamed Harpo and Marx, they had no idea. They obviously realised they were going into France, but they didn't know what they were going for at the time. It's quite surreal, really, being here, standing on the very spot where he would have been boarding the glider that particular night.
And it is sad because you lost so many mates.
Well, one of the other gliders that took off here, chalk number 67, had his best mate Vic Haynes. They'd both joined the glider pilot regiment together, and on the day that they went for their test, they were the only two to get through. They got through all their training, and sadly Vic and his pilot Billy Marfleet, they were lost over the channel, quite close to the French coast. Here we are looking at what is left of the east-west runway at RAF Harwell. It's still the old concrete, and sadly we can see it being tarmacked over at the top. But this is the last piece of history from 1944. It's quite surreal to actually be standing here where the gliders would have taken off from. Right, here we go, Ian. Now, Do remind me to get on the right side of the bloody road.
Yeah, it's on the right side of the road. Remember, El France, maintenant. We are now in France.
We're now in France. Now, this is where Ian starts to shake.
Have every on.
Because we've got to remember what so many people actually gave up for us, what they did for us and how they did it. There was a comment actually made in the service today with one of the headstones that said, not just today, remember every day. And that's absolutely perfect, because that's what it should be. We should remember all year round. They were such a small regiment and the most short-lived regiment of the British Army. And because they were disbanded after the war, you don't hear about them now. They became the Army Air Corps.
So what did they do on that night?
On D-Day itself, it was the glider pilots that brought in the first 6 gliders just past midnight on the 6th of June and dropped into Pegasus Bridge and actually took the bridges there, which protected then the beaches from the German crossing the river and the canal to the beaches where all the people were going to be arriving a few hours later.
So like it's just a massive part of the history of it all.
It's a huge part, but they were, because it was such a small regiment, the name doesn't get heard out there. You hear about the other regiments that were perhaps in the planes, in the gliders, the regiments that were on the beaches, but that little tiny glider pilot regiment that actually was crucial to that operation. If they hadn't have managed to land the planes as they did, and the purpose of that was if you dropped parachutists, they got scattered. Bringing in infantry by glider, you could pinpoint accuracy a landing and you instantly had up to 30 men ready to fight. You didn't have an engine, so it was very difficult to accurately land where you wanted to, depended where the tug pilot released you from, and then the weather. And they didn't have the navigation aids that planes have now, so they more or less sort of had a compass and a stopwatch, and they followed that against a preset journey.
French people risked their lives to keep him safe and got other people like him. People forget that, I think, sometimes.
Oh yeah, so many French people gave their lives. They risked their lives, but they also gave their lives. And even here at St Vast, the people that crashed here, it was the local people that took the bodies and looked after them and protected them and managed to get them buried.
And that's something else we mustn't forget, that special link, isn't it? It's all about.
It is. The French make us incredibly welcome when we come over here, but actually we need to be saying thank you back to them as well, because they did look after many, many of our soldiers, particularly some of the glider pilots.
And your message to younger generations, because it's the 75th now, the 80th, how many left? What's your message to younger generations?
They need to learn. They need to learn about previous wars, but also the horrors of those wars. And we all learn from those mistakes. It's very easy to have an argument with somebody, but actually try and find a solution. Communication, talk to people, but learn about their families' histories. Nearly every single child in this country will have a family member who was in a war. So find out about them and learn about them and go and remember them.
They were young straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end, against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
General, salute! Be set! Out! Why are you here?
I'm here because my father was a glider pilot. He was Staff Sergeant Mick Walker of Sea Squadron. I think what made them so special was because they had to become pilots during their training. But then when they landed, then they were soldiers, and they did everything then, you know, that the soldiers had to do in battle. So I think that's part of the reason that make them so special. And it was a one-way journey, really, over to Europe.
Yes. Yes. Just crashing in the field behind the hedge, just in front.
That's
and
right.
In fact, they crash with the plane between the apple trees, okay, and he stopped
in an orchard.
Yes, absolutely. And it's incredible to see this.
We're on camera again, Alan.
Don't fall over.
No.
Don't fall down.
I'm now stuck. But all around here in the Grande Maison,
Oui.
Germans were here.
We're living.
Yes. And behind us,
the castle.
Over the castle.
Over the castle.
Oui.
Where the commandant tour. We're staying just here. You have the roof. You can imagine. That's so dangerous.
Ah, yes.
You can see.
Absolutely. They were that close, weren't they?
German soldiers were really staying here.
Yes.
And they arrived just near the house.
What, 300-400 meters?
Yes. Right, around.
Oui. Yeah. This is the very spot, we think, where the glider crashed that night.
Exactly.
Only 150, 200 meters from the commandant's house.
Yes, absolutely.
So they might have awoken them with a bit of a surprise. But I don't know how quickly the Germans knew that obviously a glider had come down here. But of course they didn't know that it was what we now call D-Day.
She left meals, a lot of things.
They were walking towards the barn here, and suddenly a German machine gun opened up on the 6 of them, killing 4 outright. Jock Brahmer also fell, but it wasn't to be known at that time that he was still alive. And Dad had his grenade belt on, which shattered but didn't go. Didn't go off.
Just near his.
Yes, all round here. He fell to the floor, and then got up, and then came here, and sort of crouched down here, turned round to the house there. Oh, that is live, and saw the lady throw the
water.
The bucket of water. Yes, and then thought, where do I go now? And ran straight back past all the 5 bodies in the field, got back to the bottom into the wood, where, do you remember, he explained to us he had his rifle and he got into a bush and couldn't hide the rifle very well and had to stick it upright. And the Germans came into the wood and virtually machine gunned or shot into most of the bushes, apart from the one that Ron was in. And then they left the wood thinking, well, he's not here. But he was, and came out later that night under the cover of darkness and went on to your father's farm then.
Yes, but it was incredible. He recognized very well this corner.
When he got here, the memories came flooding back. Yeah.
We are arriving just on the place, just behind you, the place where Ron were staying.
Yes.
Just here.
That's right.
Alors, it's exactly the place where Ron was staying in arriving from crashing at Villers-sur-Mer by walk across the wood, and he arrived here just inside. And he pushed his body inside, and he heard German soldiers who were looking for him just on the top behind him.
That's right.
And he was waiting.
He was waiting in there. And you remember when he said at night, when it got cold, he took out the silk maps.
Yes.
And covered himself in those to try and keep warm at night.
And after he looked, after soldiers, German soldiers were passing, early in the morning, he have a look behind on the field, and he looked at a young man who were walking in the field. My grandfather owned this property, and my father was a young man, 20 years old, and he was walking to the farm during the war, and he was walking in the field behind the cave, and he heard of this plane who was crashing in Villers-sur-Mer, but he was not expecting somebody in the property. And one day, in the morning, he was walking in the field just behind the cave, and he recognized a soldier who asked him for lighting his cigarette, but he knows immediately that it is an English soldier and not a German soldier. And he was ready for helping him, but unfortunately all the German soldiers were in the country area for looking to this English soldier. And my father helped Ron Bartley, giving some details about to meet him in the evening, for giving meals in the corner of at the edge, without everybody can see that we help this man. And his sister, my aunt Simone, were working with these cows near and giving milk for giving energy. When the soldiers were looking for this man, was in this country, they are looking everywhere, and they arrive to the farm and ask to my father to visit all the buildings. At first, the main house in the chimney place for looking if this man were here. And we have to say that the soldiers, German soldiers, put their gun behind the head of my father and visit every building. And arriving in the pressoir, my father remembers that the cave where in the night Ron can go to sleep, they ask to the personnel to say Ron, he has to go away rapidly because soldiers, German soldiers were here. And when Ron go rapidly from the buildings across the windows, he lost his bullet just in front of the tunnel. But don't know. And when my father arrived with the German soldiers behind him, he opened the door for visiting this party of the building, and immediately he sees the bullet just in front of the tunnel. And he has a good idea. He goes quickly with the German soldiers behind him, with his feet for crushing the bullet on the ground. Okay, without it, catastrophe.
What was the risk? What was
the risk?
The risk.
He will be fusillé. He will be shot immediately, because all the family will be shot.
How important is it that Chris has come here to see you and talk to you? Yes. How important is that?
Yes, it's very important for us and for me, because I would like this story could be be told about all the people, because we have to know what happened here. And I'm sure there is a lot of story like that, but we have to record this story for the memory.
And the friendship between the French people and the British.
Yes, absolutely, for French people and friendship. Absolutely.
You mustn't forget that in the current times.
It's fantastic to be here in the footsteps of my father when he was here in 1944. And of course to meet the people who he considered to be the real heroes, Alain Jouvet's father, and Simone, who was the young lady who left the food in the hedge, which is just behind me here. The great bravery and the courage that those people showed, because without their help, of course, he wouldn't have got back to the UK, and had they have been caught helping an Allied airmen, of course they would have been shot. We've walked over the very ground that he would have done back in 1944, and nothing much has changed here in Normandy. We're standing next to the barn where he was hidden in a barrel very shortly because he suffered from claustrophobia, and as I say, nothing has changed here. It is exactly the same. If he were back here now, he'd recognise everything as to where we're standing now. I didn't know much about his story and wondered how we would remember it after he died in 2008. Unfortunately, when I was going through some of his belongings, I found a diary, an old exercise book which he'd obviously used for glider pilot training. Having a look in there, I found he'd written the very story of his, if I can call it, adventures here in Normandy in '44. And from that, we've been able to piece together where the glider crash landed, what happened after that here at the Jouvet farm. It really is an incredible, and we're putting the meat on the bones so that the story can be told properly. 83 days behind enemy lines, I think for anybody was an incredible feat. But of course I go back to say that without the help of the French inhabitants here, and of course the resistance, and he met quite a few of the resistance people in this part of the world. Without their help, of course, the story would not have been written and would not have been told by ourselves.
And there's this sort of incredible friendship now between you and Alain.
Well, absolutely. It was great to meet Alain and meet the son of André Houvet, who of course helped my father that morning when he was ploughing the field in the just above the wood here to my right hand side. It was just a chance meeting. It really was incredible. Had he not have been there, we don't know what would have happened to my father after that. He would probably not have been introduced to the resistance through André Houvet. Yes, I think you might say he used up quite a few of his lives. He could have come down in the sea quite easily. Crashing in an orchard was not an easy thing to do. The glider could have been smashed to smithereens. I mean, it was in a pretty bad way, but they all survived the crash. And of course the story after that is just incredible. Evading the Germans, they could be walking along a hedge and the Germans on the other side of it. They were that close at times to being caught. As I say, with the help of the resistance, Paul Harrico, his daughter Marcel, who was tremendous, he fortunately survived it and was able to get back to the UK. The veterans are getting fewer and fewer, so somebody has to be left to be able to tell their story. And albeit this is only one small story about what happened to somebody in the war, nevertheless it's an exciting story, at least hopefully everybody thinks so, having seen this. But we must keep it alive for future generations so that they know what happened here in 1944.
Together today in the presence of God, to remember those soldiers of the Glider Pilot Regiment who died in the service of their country, and all those that we have lost since.
They all took the Queen's shilling, went off to fight the Hun. Soon learnt the pain of loss once the fighting had begun. So many never made it home, lost on foreign shores. Many more were injured and would be the same no more. The old man's eyes mist with tears as he remembers every face, each of his fallen brothers and the killing which took place.
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today.
Harry, standards.
Children are very excited.
They're from my parish.
Geef maar een handje. It's you. It's okay. He's a bit shy.
Name, rank and number. DLG Cooper. Name, rank, Staff Sergeant. And
number. Do you remember your army number?
7346-124. How can you forget it?
Can you remember back what it was like, you know, that moment when you were coming into land? Can you, is it in your mind? Can you remember it all?
You never forget it.
What was it like? Tell, because people have no idea.
Well, you never will. Unless you're in and operating the controls, you've no idea what it's like. In the main, it's very easy. And of course very handy because it was such an excellent machine.
What's going through your mind as you're approaching the landing zone?
Whether we'll be back in time for Christmas.
So, can you remember what happened when you landed? What, you know, take me through the events, you know, landing and coming out of the glider group.
Well, it's just normal. There's nothing special about it. You know, there's a place to land, a place to get out of the plane, and so on. And it's quite simple.
Were you under? You were obviously under fire. It was not the easiest of landings.
You're always under fire.
Why? These are obvious questions, but to you, why is today so important?
Because there are so many of our friends that we remember who will not be with us, but our being here will help to maintain their looking after them.
Were you pleased to see so many people here today?
I was pleased and surprised.
Because it's the 75th, isn't it? You know, there's a few of you gentlemen about.
Right. Yeah, yes, that's right. Very few. The original pilots, the 6 that landed, all dead. I'm very lucky.
You seem to have quite a spark about you. Is that part of the qualities? Because from what I've learned, is that as a glider pilot, you were a special breed. You know, you were clever men, you could fly an aircraft, but you were fighters as well. You know, just tell us about the qualities that were needed to do your job.
I think my commanding officer of B Squadron put it succinctly. They were bloody minded. And he didn't need to control anyone. He knew that whatever happened, we'd be there doing what we were to do.
Because it was an extraordinarily difficult. I mean, you say it was easy flying those things, but I've looked at the gliders, and they're huge pieces of machinery. There was no blooming motor.
Well, that's all right. Nothing's impossible.
And did you know? I mean, did you know Ron Bartley?
Yes.
Tell us about your friendship with Ron Bartley. How did you know Ron?
Well, we were just friends, that's all. Quietly. And you don't make a fuss about it.
Julie, mate, what's happened today is, I mean, you're a bit of a superstar today. You're getting a lot of attention. I mean, I think you're due that, aren't you, do you think, after all these years?
Well, if you say so. You know, I mean, they who live the longest get the plaudits of being alive.
And do you come back here every year? What you know?
No.
No.
You can't keep remembering in the way that people think they should. No.
When did you first come back then?
When did I first come back?
After, yeah. Was it a few years after?
Well, you see, I told you we were all bloody minded. And I didn't come back here till the year 21, so that was 1965.
Well, I suppose at that time there were an awful lot of veterans about. It was a very different experience, I dare say.
Oh yes.
And in terms of going back to your memory, so what the you glider pilots were so special that I know you wanted to fight, but they just shipped you back out again. Is that what happened to you?
Let's see now. Well, it should have done, but it didn't. I mean, we should have we landed. We were told, get down to the beach, get on a boat and get back home. So we did. Then we were supposed to fly a glider with a lot of people and go on operation number 2. But in point of fact, it never came off. Never came off.
And again, this thing about somebody who's never been, never been a soldier, because, never been. The word fear doesn't mean anything to you, though.
No. No, if you've been married as long as I have, it doesn't mean.
And the bigger question, though, we're living in strange times now, where Europe was coming together, and now Europe is pulling itself apart. What's your message to people about peace and friendship? What have you learned? I mean, what do you think about that?
I think what people have got to do, and they're beginning to do it, think about the future. Do the things that should make the future possible.